The first thing the galaxy learned about humans was that we were noisy. It's not loud in the way a warship's engines were loud, or in the way a dying sun screamed through a sensor. No. Humans were noisy in the way a campfire was noisy in a dead forest, in the way laughter sounded wrong in a room built for fear. The ultimatum reached Earth on a cold, clear morning. It arrived on every screen, every satellite feed, every civilian network, the way a hand reaches into a nest and closes. One simple demand, translated with perfect precision. Surrender your world within 24 hours. Open your atmosphere for occupation. Disarm, comply, or be erased. Most species would have stopped breathing. On the bridge of the alien flagship, the Cathari delegation watched the transmission play out on a wall of floating light. Their faces were smooth, their eyes like polished amber, their fingers long and careful as if the air itself might cut them. Around them, aides and analysts shifted in silence, afraid to disturb the moment. Earth hung in the background of the main viewing pane, blue and white and fragile-looking, a jewel in an ugly part of space. The Cathari preferred worlds that did not fight back. Worlds with gentle gravity, mild storms, soft ecosystems that could be trimmed and repurposed. Earth did not match any of those profiles. That was why the Council had decided to take it before humans grew into something worse. A Cathari strategist, thin as wire, tapped the air and brought up the file every species used when they wanted to feel confident. Classification: Deathworld, average gravity, high, atmospheric pressure, punishing, magnetosphere, violent, predator density, extreme, microbial hazard, severe, environmental volatility, frequent. The data should have been enough to make the room cautious. Instead, it made them smug. Deathworlds produced brute creatures with short lifespans. They burned bright, then burned out, fought among themselves until nothing valuable remained. Humans were frontier species, the analyst said. Tough, yes, but isolated, underdeveloped compared to the core worlds. They had only recently started pushing beyond their moon. They had no allies in the Council's space, no treaties worth honoring, no fleets worth fearing. They would fold. The Cathari High Negotiator sat at the head of the table, posture perfectly calm, as if surrender was already signed. A holographic model of Earth rotated slowly beside them. Tiny red markers showed every military base. Tiny blue ones showed every city, every place that would matter when the occupation began. 24 hours? The negotiator murmured, voice a soft click through the translator. Generous. An aide leaned in. Their species communicates constantly. Panic will spread quickly. Their leaders will argue. Their public will demand safety. Of course, the negotiator said. That is what soft worlds do, but Earth did not answer like a soft world. For the first hour, the Cathari intercept teams monitored every band and channel. Expected frantic debate, desperate diplomatic pleading, maybe internal collapse. They saw some of that. Sure, they saw screaming pundits. They saw military briefings. They saw officials with pale faces and rigid smiles. Then, strangely, they saw humans eating, not in shelters, rationing, eating at roadside stalls, eating in crowded rooms under bright lights, eating while staring at their phones, laughing, shoving each other's shoulders like the sky had not just been threatened. A Cathari analyst adjusted the filters twice, convinced the feed was corrupted. On a coastal city feed, a human in a stained apron held a tray of baked dough and raised it to the camera like an offering. If the aliens want Earth, they can take my shift too, he said. I'm tired. The room on the flagship went quiet, not with fear but with confusion. It got worse. In another feed, humans gathered in a public square with handheld signs. The Cathari translation system rendered the words cleanly. Welcome, invaders. Please park in the designated zone. If you blow up the planet, can you start with my neighbor's house? 24 hours? Take your time. We're busy. The Cathari did not understand humor the way humans did. To them, laughter in the face of danger was either insanity or a signal of hidden power. The strategists tightened their jaw. Is this a cultural defense mechanism? An aide asked. A denial response? No, the strategist said slowly, staring at the feeds. This is familiarity. They pulled up the human history archive, the pieces the Council had bothered to collect. Wars, plagues, famines, storms, collapses, rebuilds. Humans had been living under pressure since they first stood upright. Their world had trained them with gravity that demanded strong bones, whether that punished weak planning, predators that punished distraction, and microbes that punished arrogance. Humans grew up learning that survival was not a moment. It was a habit. In the second hour, the Cathari intercepted an emergency address by Earth's primary coalition. Leaders stood behind a plain podium, faces tight, eyes focused. It finally looked like the surrender they expected. But the human spokesperson did not beg. They did not plead for mercy or offer tribute. They did not call the invaders superior. They spoke like someone warning a stranger not to touch a live wire. "You have issued a deadline," the spokesperson said. "We have received it. We're discussing your request." The Cathari negotiator nodded, satisfied. Then the spokesperson continued, voice steady. "There is something you should understand. We are not a peaceful species because we are gentle. We are peaceful because we are tired. We built rules because our planet punished the ruleless. If you enter our home, you will meet a species that learned endurance before it learned spaceflight." Behind the podium, a screen showed images, not threats, not weapons, but mountains of ice, flooded streets, wildfires, storms that bent metal signs flat, deserts that ate towns, oceans that swallowed ships. Then it showed humans, small against all of it, digging, lifting, rebuilding, walking forward. The Cathari analyst whispered, "They are boasting." The strategists shook their head. "No," they are explaining. On the flagship, the air felt heavier, even with artificial gravity. Not because of fear, but because a certainty was cracking. At the council chamber orbiting a nearby relay world, a different group of aliens watched too. Species that had never set foot on a death world. Species who wore environmental masks on mild planets. Species who called any creature with claws a monster. They listened to the human message, and for the first time felt a thin, sharp edge of alien fear. The humans were not scrambling to comply. They were buying time, not to surrender, to prepare. The Cathari had planned an occupation like a parade. Dropships in clear skies. Control nodes seized. Communications restricted. A quick display of force to break morale. It always worked because morale was always the first thing a soft world lost. But Earth's morale did not break. It hardened. In Hour 3, the intercept teams detected something unusual. Civilian radio channels filled with jokes, yes, but also with instructions. People shared supplies. Neighborhoods organized. Communities checked on elders and children. Small groups met in garages and basements. Not to riot, not to panic, but to assign tasks like they had done during storms and blackouts. Humans moved in patterns they had practiced for generations. The Cathari strategist zoomed in on a feed from a rural region. Human with scarred hands laid out equipment on a table. Ropes, metal tools, thick clothing, handheld radios. Around them, others listened quietly. "We've got 18 hours, the human said. "We can laugh for a few. Then we work." The translator caught every word. 18 hours. That number repeated across more feeds, like a shared decision. The Cathari negotiator's calm began to slip. Why would they choose 18? The strategist answered without looking away from the screen. "Because they have calculated something. They're using the first portion to control fear. Then they will use the rest to move." To move where? The strategist finally turned, and their amber eyes looked darker than before. Into positions you did not plan for. Into places you do not know. Into a mindset you cannot measure. The council had written humans off as a rough species, with limited reach. Yet their networks showed a different truth. Humans were not unified by perfect agreement. They were unified by instinct. Survival instincts. When a predator circled, humans did not freeze. They made noise. They made fire. They made plans. They made jokes, so their hands would stop shaking. Then they aimed. At Hour 6, the first human response reached the Catharia flagship directly. Not a plea, not a surrender, but a simple file burst, tagged as public, broadcast to every ship and station within range. It was a video. A human sat in a small room, face plain, eyes tired, wearing a uniform with no decoration. Their voice was calm, almost bored, as if they were addressing a storm warning. "You gave us 24 hours, the human said. "Thank you, we needed it." The Kethri negotiator's throat clicked. Needed it for what? The human on the screen looked straight into the camera, and for a moment the alien observers felt as if the gaze had weight. "For two things," the human said. "First, to make sure our children did not spend their last day crying. Second, to remind ourselves what you are." The human paused, then continued, softer. "You are not gods. You are not monsters. You are just another thing, trying to take what is not yours. Our planet has tried that too." In the background, faintly, there was sound. Not sirens, not screams. A crowd, far away, cheering, like a stadium. Like a celebration, like a species choosing to face the dark together. The strategist's claws dug into the table. "They are not afraid enough," the negotiator swallowed. "Or they are afraid in a way that makes them dangerous." Outside the flagship, Earth rotated in silence, clouds curling over continents like bandages. Blue oceans glinted with sunlight. From space, it still looked gentle. But the Cathari now understood something their files had not captured. A death world does not just create strong bodies. It creates a culture that expects pain, adapts to loss, and keeps moving anyway. It creates people who can smile with blood in their mouths because they have done it before. It creates people who know that fear is not an ending, it is fuel. The negotiator tried to regain control, increase surveillance, find their weapons, find their fleets. The analyst hesitated. "We are detecting a rise in launch activity, but not from military bases, from civilian sites, from improvised platforms." "That is impossible," the negotiator snapped. "It is happening," the analyst said, voice tight. "They are putting objects into orbit. Many objects, small, fast, irregular." The strategist's eyes narrowed. "Debris." The analysts shook their head, guided. Silence fell over the chamber. Humans had no fleets worth fearing, the council had said. Yet in the first hours of an invasion threat, they were building something in the open, with civilians, with factories, with whatever they had. Like a species that had been waiting for the sky to turn hostile. Because on Earth the sky had always been hostile. The Cathari negotiators stared at the orbital readouts, watching dots multiply like a spreading infection. Their hands trembled once, then stilled, as if discipline could hold back reality. 18 hours, they whispered. Then another signal arrived. Not a message this time, but a sensor alert from the outer patrol line.
Outa!
Something had changed in the dark between ships. Something subtle and wrong, like pressure dropping before a storm. A patrol craft reported a brief contact, a shape too small for a warship. It's too fast for debris, vanishing behind the curve of Earth's atmosphere. No engine signature, no heat bloom. Just a shadow moving with purpose. The strategist felt cold in a way their species rarely did, because only one kind of creature moved like that. A predator that knew it was being watched and did not care. The negotiator opened their mouth to issue orders, but the next alert cut through the chamber, sharp and immediate. It was a second contact, then a third. Then dozens blooming across the screen, surrounding the invasion fleet's approach corridor like a net being pulled tight. And in that moment, with 18 hours still on the clock, the Cathari finally realized the mistake. They had given a Deathworld species time to stop being amused. They had given humans time to hunt. The first human object struck the edge of the Cathari sensor net without warning. It did not explode. It did not fire. It did not even slow. Passed through a thin band of detection space like a stone through fog, close enough to trigger alarms but too small and cold to classify as a weapon. By the time the system adjusted, it was gone, swallowed by Earth's shadow. The patrol crew stared at their screens, waiting for the threat profile to resolve. It never did. On the flagship, tension settled into the chamber like dust. Officers stopped shifting, aides stopped whispering. They were not forming a defensive line. They were not forming an attack wedge. They were waiting. The Cathari strategist finally spoke. "They are using the planet as cover." "That is standard," the negotiator said, though the words sounded thinner than before. "No," the strategist replied. "It is intimate. Earth's gravity well was deep, its magnetic field violent, its atmosphere thick and turbulent. Most species avoided low orbit around such worlds unless necessary. Engines strained, sensors glitched, heat built up fast. Earth was uncomfortable, even from space. Humans treated it like home. On the human side, there was no grand command room with floating light and polished surfaces. There were smaller rooms, cramped and loud, filled with old equipment and newer hands. There were warehouses that smelled of oil and dust. There were classrooms repurposed into planning spaces. Chalkboards covered in rough diagrams drawn by people who had never expected to aim anything at the sky. A human with gray hair and a bent posture watched a screen showing orbital paths. He sipped from a chipped mug, listening to younger voices argue behind him. "They will see it," someone said. The older human did not look back. "Understanding is optional," he said. "Respect comes later." Outside, the planet kept moving. Oceans rose and fell. Storms spun where storms always had. Somewhere, a forest burned. Somewhere else, rain flooded a town. None of it paused for the alien fleet waiting above. That was the first lesson Earth had taught humanity. Nothing waits for you. In the council chamber, representatives from softer worlds pressed close to their displays, antennae twitching, eyes widening. They replayed intercepted human feeds, slowing them down, isolating faces, voices, patterns. "They should be afraid," one delegate whispered. "Why are they not afraid?" "They are afraid," another answered. "They are just used to it." The phrase passed through the chamber like a chill. Long before humans reached the stars, Earth had been trying to kill them. Not all at once, not with intent, but constantly. Gravity that crushed the careless. Cold that froze skin solid. Heat that cooked flesh. Invisible microbes that invaded lungs and blood. Predators that hunted for sport and hunger both. Humans survived by learning. They learned to read clouds, to listen to silence, to build shelters and tear them down and build again. They learned that strength did not come from comfort. It came from adaptation. The Council's data files had recorded all of this as numbers: casualty rates, atmospheric pressure, predator mass ratios. They had not recorded the habits it built. On Earth, children learned early that falling hurt, that pain was temporary, that standing up mattered more. By the time they were adults, the idea of an easy life felt suspicious. On the flagship, an aide finally broke protocol. "Negotiator," they said carefully. "We are detecting unusual heat patterns in the upper atmosphere. Not weapons discharge. Controlled burns. From where?" The negotiator asked. "Everywhere," the aide replied, "across multiple continents." The strategist leaned closer. "Explain." "They are lighting their own sky," the aide said, "creating interference. Aurora-like effects. They are flooding orbit with noise, but it is natural noise. Solar interactions amplified by atmospheric manipulation." The room fell silent. Most species avoided interfering with their own magnetosphere. It was dangerous, unpredictable. Humans were not avoiding it, they were using it. The strategist felt something unfamiliar tighten in their chest. "They are hiding inside their planet." "Yes," the aide said. And shaping it, the negotiator stared at Earth, no longer seeing a jewel, but a shield made of storms and gravity and fire. In another part of space, a human shuttle skimmed the edge of the atmosphere, hull vibrating hard enough to rattle teeth. Inside, a young pilot grinned through clenched jaw muscles. "Feels like home," she muttered. Her co-pilot laughed, white-knuckled. "Remind me why we did not train on something easier." "Because nothing easy ever prepared us for anything," she said, adjusting her trajectory. "Hold on." They dipped lower, riding turbulence that would have torn apart a Cathari craft. Sensors flickered. Instruments screamed warnings that humans had learned to tune out unless they crossed a certain threshold. Below them, the planet roared. Above them, alien eyes watched shapes vanish and reappear like ghosts. On the flagship, the negotiator called for a tactical projection. "If they intend to strike, where?" Strategists studied the data, then shook their heads slowly. "They're not positioning for a strike." "Then what are they doing?" "They are forcing us to react," the strategist said. "They are shaping our choices." That was when the council delegate from a low-gravity water world finally spoke, voice trembling. "That is predator behavior." The word hung in the air. Predators did not rush. They tested. They circled, pushed prey into unfamiliar terrain. They waited for exhaustion or mistake. Humans were doing none of it with weapons yet. They were doing it with patience. On Earth, the laughter had not stopped, but it had changed. It was quieter now, more private. Jokes shared between tasks, smiles exchanged over tightened straps and checked seals. Fear was present, but it had a place. It did not own the room. A human woman kissed her child's forehead and handed them to a neighbor, then pulled on heavy gloves and joined a line moving toward a factory floor. No speeches, no tears, just a nod. A human man stood on a rooftop, staring at the stars, breathing slow. He had survived fires, floods, and wars. Aliens did not feel so different. Across the planet, the same thing happened again and again. Ordinary people doing extraordinary preparation without ever naming it that. Back on the flagship, the negotiator finally admitted what they had been avoiding. We misjudged them. The strategist did not correct them. The word misjudged felt small. They are not trying to show us strength, the strategist said. They are reminding themselves who they are. And who is that? The negotiator asked. The strategist watched another human craft disappear into the glow of the atmosphere. A species that lives on a world that never stops trying to kill it. A species that learned to laugh because crying wasted breath. An alarm sounded sharper than before. Contact, an officer called out. Close range? Visual confirmation? The main display shifted. Human object floated into view, small and angular, no weapons visible, no markings. It rotated slowly, broadcasting on an open channel. The negotiator raised a hand. On screen. The image resolved. Human face appeared. Older, lined, eyes steady. No uniform, no insignia, just a person. You are early, the human said calmly. We still have time. The negotiator struggled to maintain composure. You have not accepted our terms. No, the human replied. We have not. Then why contact us? The human tilted their head slightly. To ask a question? The negotiator hesitated. Ask. The human's gaze did not waver. Do you know how many extinction-level events our planet has survived? The question seemed absurd. That is irrelevant. It is very relevant, the human said. Because every time the world tried to end us, we learned something new. We learned how to endure, how to adapt, how to rebuild. You gave us 24 hours, thinking time would weaken us. The human leaned closer to the camera. Time is what shaped us. The feed cut. Silence followed, heavy and absolute. Around the flagship, human-made objects continued to move, weaving through gravity and radiation like fish through a storm. None fired, none fled. They simply existed, confident in a space that hated them. The strategist finally spoke, voice low. They are not afraid of us. The negotiator closed their eyes briefly. Should be. No, the strategist corrected. We should be afraid of what happens if they stop laughing. Outside, Earth turned, its storms bright and violent, its surface scarred and alive. The alien fleet waited, surrounded by a planet that had trained its children well. And with the deadline ticking down, no one could say what humans were building inside the noise. Only that whatever it was, it had been born on a death world, and it was ready to endure. The Cathari fleet had arrived expecting a single kind of war. A clean war. A controlled war. One that happened in predictable corridors, with ships lined up at sensible distances, with surrender signed before anything messy began. They had rehearsed it the way you rehearse a ceremony, every movement meant to display authority without spending too much energy. But the longer they watched Earth, the more the rehearsal felt like a costume. In the outer ring of their formation, junior officers stared at sensor returns that refused to settle. Human objects dipped into the atmosphere, vanished, then reappeared in new places. Dots multiplied, then spread out, then clustered again. The planet's magnetosphere surged, flooding space with natural interference that made the Cathari instruments twitch like nervous animals. A Cathari navigator with trembling hands whispered a quiet phrase from their childhood, a superstition meant to protect against storms at sea. They did not know they were doing it until the words were already out. On a nearby escort cruiser, a medical officer walked the halls, scanning faces. The crew were not injured. Their oxygen levels were fine. Their hearts were simply beating too fast. Fear had entered the ship through the screens, not through the hull. The Cathari High Negotiator called another council link. The chamber on the relay world appeared in blue light, filled with representatives from civilizations that had never endured a true survival trial. Their robes were immaculate. Their skin glowed from gentle suns. Their voices carried the soft certainty of people who believed the universe would remain polite. "We request guidance," the negotiator said. "Human behavior is irregular. They have not responded with formal surrender or formal resistance." A delegate from a low-pressure garden world leaned forward, eyes wide. "Their lack of submission suggests irrationality. Irrational species are unstable. Unstable species must be controlled quickly." A second delegate, a thin creature with delicate limbs, spoke with a tremble. "Or avoided." The negotiator's jaw tightened. Avoidance is not an option. Earth is strategically positioned. Its resources and orbit lanes are valuable. A third delegate, older and quiet, studied the feeds with a gaze that had lost its softness. "Your data labeled them Deathworlders," they said. "You treated it like a warning label." "It is not. It is an origin story." The negotiator's patience frayed. "They are still a developing species." The older delegate did not raise their voice. Developing does not mean fragile. Sometimes it means hungry. The link ended without resolution, leaving the negotiator with the taste of it. Hunger. The word felt wrong and accurate at the same time. In the civilian quarters of the flagship, families of diplomats and support staff lived in carefully regulated comfort. Their corridors were quiet, their gardens were controlled, their children played with soft toys in rooms that never got too cold. When the ultimatum had been issued, many of them had celebrated. Earth would surrender, and the Council would add another world to its fold. New trade, new labor, new influence. Easy. Now, the same civilians stood around public screens, watching humans laugh and work and launch objects into orbit with reckless speed. They listened to the human spokesperson's warning. They watched the human face on the open channel ask about extinction-level events. A Cathari mother pulled her child closer without realizing it. "Why are they smiling?" the child asked. The mother swallowed, "Because they do not want to show fear." "But if they are afraid," the child said, honest and confused, "should we not go away?" The mother had no answer that felt safe to say. On Earth, in a coastal city that had been rebuilt twice after storms, a group of humans gathered in a warehouse lit by hanging lamps. The air smelled like metal and salt. A handful of people wore uniforms, but most wore ordinary clothes layered with practical gear. Their faces looked like the faces of workers, parents, and neighbors. Their eyes looked like the eyes of people who had decided something. A young man tightened a strap on a heavy pack and tried to sound casual. "Think they can hear us down there?" An older woman checked the seal on a case, hands steady. "They can hear the whole planet," she said. "That is why we are quiet where it matters." A third person, broad-shouldered and tired-looking, held up a small device no bigger than a fist. "This is all we have," he said. The older woman nodded. "Then we use it well. No speeches, no dramatic vows, just the dull, stubborn rhythm of preparation." They moved like people setting up for a hurricane, except the hurricane was watching them from orbit. In another part of the world, far inland, a human child sat under a kitchen table while adults talked above. The child had a pencil and paper and was drawing a ship. Not the alien ship, a human ship. Looked like a box with wings and too many lines. The child added a smiley face to the side, then wrote a word they had heard on the news. Survive. Their mother knelt and kissed their hair. "Stay here," she whispered. "No matter what." The child nodded, serious. "Are they coming?" maybe the mother said. "But you know what we do when something comes?" The child stared at the drawing. "We don't panic," they said. The mother's eyes shone with something like grief and pride. "We don't panic," she repeated. Above Earth, the Cathari strategist walked the main viewing deck alone for a moment, leaving the negotiator to speak with officers. The strategists watched the planet rotate. They watched lightning web across a storm front. They watched the faint glow of human city lights on the night side. They had studied Earth's predator density, its gravity, its volatile climate. They had not studied what it did to a mind. A soft world taught you that safety was a default, that the universe would remain stable unless something broke it. Earth taught you the opposite, taught you that stability was temporary and earned, taught you that survival was a skill you practiced every day, even when nothing was wrong, because something would be wrong soon enough. The strategist felt, for the first time in their career, like they were standing outside a cage. And the door was open. An officer approached with a careful step. "Strategist," they said, voice low. "We have new intercepts from human civilian networks. They are sharing instructions." "Military instructions?" Strategist asked. The officer hesitated. "No, community instructions. Medical. Supply emergency response. They are coordinating in a distributed way." The strategist's eyes narrowed. "They are preparing their entire population." "Yes," the officer said. "It's not just their soldiers." The strategist stared at the orbital display, at the human objects drifting in slow, deliberate patterns. Realization settled like a stone. Soft civilizations separated war from life. They made war a specialized function. They insulated civilians. They preserved comfort because comfort was the proof of their progress. Humans did not separate war from life the same way. It's not because they loved war, but because their world had never allowed them to pretend danger was only for professionals. On Earth, danger came from weather, disease, hunger, predators, and each other. Survival was a shared responsibility. A species like that did not crumble when threatened. It distributed the weight. The officer cleared their throat. "There's more." Human broadcasts are filled with a phrase repeated. "What phrase?" Officer looked uncomfortable. "Hold the line." The strategist did not know the full cultural meaning, but they could feel it. A line was not a wall. A line was something you stood on with your own body. In the council relay world, an observer from a merchant civilization watched the feeds and trembled. Their people had never fought a war. They had bought security with trade and diplomacy. Their cities were made of glass-like stone and soft light. Their children played in open plazas without fear of storms, because storms were rare and gentle. They imagined humans in those plazas and felt a strange ache. Humans would not relax there. Humans would watch the sky. The observer sent a private message to their sibling back home. "Do not celebrate. They are not surrendering. They are becoming something." On the flagship, the Kethari negotiator convened the command staff again. Their voice remained smooth, but their hands rested on the table with a new tension. "We proceed with the occupation," the negotiator said. "We cannot allow this delay to grow into organized resistance." A tactical officer swallowed. "If we descend into low orbit, our ships will be exposed to atmospheric interference. Their magnetosphere manipulation is increasing. Our shields are not tuned for this level of natural volatility." The negotiator's eyes sharpened. "Tune them." The officer's voice tightened. "That will take time." The strategist stepped forward. "Time is what they are buying," they said quietly. "If we rush, we enter their terrain. If we wait, they finish whatever they are building." The negotiator's gaze flicked to the strategist. "So what do you recommend?" The strategist paused. They could feel the weight of every eye. "We stop thinking like occupiers," they said. "We think like prey that wandered too close to a predator's den." A murmur ran through the room, offended and frightened. The negotiator's voice dropped. "Be careful. I am being careful," the strategist replied. "That is the point." Another officer spoke, a young one trying to cling to certainty. "They have no fleet, no heavy weapons. They've not fired." The strategist looked at them. "A human with a stone can kill a giant if they know where to throw it," they said. "Their planet taught them aim." The negotiator lifted a hand. "Enough. We will send a probe formation into the atmosphere to map the interference and locate their launch sites." The strategist's eyes narrowed, but they did not argue. They knew a command decision had been made. They only hoped the negotiator understood what they were doing. The probe formation dropped an hour later, sleek Cathari craft built for precision. They slipped toward Earth's atmosphere like needles, engines humming, sensors wide open. For a moment it looked clean, then the planet reached up. Turbulence slammed into the probes. Magnetic surges cracked across their shields like invisible waves. Sensor data turned into static, then into nonsense. One probe spun wildly, its guidance fighting forces it had never been designed to handle. The Cathari watched in disbelief as the probe struggled, not against weapons, but against weather, against Earth itself. And through the chaos, something else moved. A small human object rose from the night side, barely visible, riding a column of heat like a bird on an updraft. It slid past the probes with a calmness that felt insulting. It did not fire. It simply positioned itself between the probes and the atmosphere, as if to say, "Not yet." On the flagship, a junior officer whispered, "They are hurting us." The strategist's throat went dry. "Yes," they said. "They are." On Earth, in a modest room lit by a single lamp, the older human from earlier watched a live feed of orbital movement. A younger person stood beside him, anxious. "Are we really doing this?" the younger person asked. "Against ships like that?" The older human took a slow breath. "We are not doing this because we want to," he said. "We are doing this because we have no other option." He pointed at the screen where alien probes struggled in the atmosphere's edge. "See that? They built a civilization that expects the universe to behave. Our world never behaved. We learned to build with failure in mind." The younger person's voice shook. "But they can erase us." The older human's eyes softened just slightly. "Maybe," he said, "but listen to me. They gave us 24 hours because they think we measure life in comfort. We measure life in endurance." He stood, joints creaking, and placed a hand on the younger person's shoulder. "We have survived ice ages. We have survived plagues. We have survived each other. We have survived because we refuse to stop. That refusal is our real weapon." Somewhere far away, a human radio station played a simple song. The host's voice was calm, steady, as if announcing a weather update. "If you can hear this," the host said, "check on your neighbor, fill your water, charge what you can, keep your kids close. Do we hold the line?" In orbit, the Cathari probes finally retreated, battered by forces they could not classify as enemy fire. They returned with partial data, smeared and incomplete. But one fragment was clear. The human objects were not random. They were positioned at key points along the fleet's likely descent paths, not to attack, but to watch, to measure, to wait for the right moment. The negotiator stared at the fragment and felt their confidence thin further. "They are planning to fight," they said, "more to themselves than anyone else." The strategist did not answer with words. They looked at Earth, and in their mind, they saw a creature raised in storms, standing barefoot on broken ground, smiling through fear because fear was familiar. The Council had wanted Earth because it was valuable. Now Earth was valuable in a different way. It was a death world that had produced a species capable of turning even a deadline into a tool. And with each hour that passed, the laughter faded, replaced by a silence that felt like a held breath before a strike. The galaxy had asked humans to surrender. Humans had answered by showing the galaxy what it looked like when a frontier species stopped begging the universe for mercy and started treating it like something to endure. And somewhere inside the interference, inside the stormlit sky, inside the tight net of moving human shadows, something waited to be revealed. Not a fleet, not a weapon, but an intention. One the aliens still did not understand. One that might be far worse than war. The silence changed first. It was subtle, easy to miss if you were not listening for it. The background noise of space around Earth, the constant whisper of charged particles and magnetic interference, grew uneven. Not louder, not quieter. Uneven, like a breath held too long. On the Cathari flagship, technicians leaned closer to their displays, instincts prickling. Systems that had adapted to the storm of Earth's magnetosphere now reported pockets of calm forming where there should have been chaos. The interference was not fading. It was being shaped. A sensor officer swallowed. "They are opening corridors." The negotiator looked up sharply. "For an attack?" The officer shook their head. "For passage." For us, the strategist felt their pulse spike. They want us to come closer. That realization struck harder than any weapon could have. Predators did not always hide. Sometimes they stepped aside and let prey walk forward, just to see what would happen. Round Earth, human objects adjusted their positions. They did not rush. They drifted, precise and patient, clearing narrow paths through turbulence and radiation. The message was unmistakable. If the fleet wanted to proceed, it could. The Cathari negotiator stared at the display, torn between relief and dread. "They are inviting us." "Yes," the strategist said quietly. "Into their world." On the Council relay world, panic crept through chambers built for calm debate. Delegates argued in sharp whispers, pointing at screens that showed Earth's orbit glowing with controlled chaos. A civilization from a temperate moon world began emergency evacuation procedures without waiting for a vote. "We have never seen this," one delegate said. species that weaponizes its planet. They are not weaponizing it, the older delegate replied. They're trusting it. That is worse. On Earth, the corridors opened in the sky like scars parting. Human observers watched from bunkers, rooftops, and improvised command centers. No cheers. No triumph. Just focus. A human woman sat at a console in a reinforced basement, listening to overlapping voices through her headset. She marked positions on a rough map, hands steady, despite the tremor in her chest. Path is clear, someone said. Keep it narrow, another voice replied. Do not make it easy. She took a breath. They are moving. In orbit, the first Kethari ship committed to the descent. Its hull glowed as it brushed the upper atmosphere, shields straining. I'm inside. Crew members braced, unused to the violence of a sky that fought back. The ship passed through the corridor, turbulence scraping its sides like claws. For a moment, it seemed it would make it through without incident. Then the gravity shifted, not suddenly, gradually, just enough to pull the ship off its expected vector. Systems compensated, then overcompensated. Alarms chimed, not shrill, but persistent. Adjusting, the pilot said, voice tight. The strategist watched from the flagship, breath shallow. They are bending the well, they murmured. Earth's gravity was not uniform. Humans knew that. They had mapped it with satellites and felt it in their bones. They were exploiting tiny variations, subtle enough to escape casual notice, strong enough to matter when multiplied by mass and speed. The ship recovered barely, sliding through the corridor and emerging into lower orbit. It did not crash. It did not retreat. But it did not feel victorious either. On the bridge of that ship, a Kethari officer wiped condensation from their brow. That was supposed to be safe, a senior crew member replied, voice hoarse. Safe for them. From the planet below, human eyes watched the ship's path with careful interest. A young human man leaned back in his chair, exhaling slowly. They made it, he said. An older voice answered from the speaker. Good. Let them think they can. The second ship followed, then the third. Each descent took more effort. Each passage felt tighter. The corridors shifted slightly between ships, forcing constant recalculation. The Kethari fleet advanced, but not as a unified force. It stretched, elongated, formation strained by the planet's influence. The strategists felt a cold understanding settle in. Humans were not planning a single decisive blow. They were exhausting the fleet mentally and mechanically before anything truly began. In the civilian quarters of the flagship, fear broke through the illusion of safety. Artificial gardens went untended.
Our meals sat untouched.
Families huddled close, listening to the distant hum of engines and alarms that should never have reached them. A Kethari adolescent stared at a screen showing Earth's storms.
Why do they live there? They asked their parent. Why would anyone choose that world?
The parent did not answer right away. They watched a human broadcast instead. A simple feed from a small town. People stood in a school gym, handing out supplies, speaking softly, checking lists.
They did not choose it, the parent finally said. They survived it. On Earth, the tension seeped into quiet moments. A human father sat on the edge of a bed, fastening a worn bracelet around his wrist. His child watched from the doorway. Is it starting? The child asked. Yes, the father said. The child hesitated. Are you scared? The father met their eyes. He considered lying, then chose not to. Yes, he said. But being scared does not mean we stop. The child nodded, absorbing it like a lesson passed down through generations. Like the storms. Like the storms, the father agreed. In the upper atmosphere, the first unexpected contact occurred. A Kethari escort ship reported a brief impact. Not explosive, not destructive. Something struck its hull and bounced away, leaving a shallow dent and a smear of dark residue. What was that? The captain demanded. Sensors scrambled. Unknown material? Organic traces present. The strategist stiffened. Organic? The report continued, hesitant. It appears to be. Rock, ice, soil, mixed. Silence followed. Humans were throwing pieces of their planet into orbit. Not as weapons meant to destroy, but as reminders. Earth was everywhere, even here. The negotiator's voice wavered for the first time. They're contaminating our ships. They are marking them, the strategist said softly. Like territory. Fear rippled through the fleet, unspoken but sharp. For species raised on sterile worlds, contamination was a nightmare. For humans, dirt was a constant companion. On the Council Relay world, an emergency session dissolved into shouting. Some demanded withdrawal. Others demanded immediate annihilation. The older delegate watched quietly, sadness in their eyes. "You cannot unlearn what you are seeing," they said, to no one in particular. "Even if you survive this." Back in orbit, the human objects shifted again. Corridors narrowed further. The magnetosphere surged, then dipped, like a pulse. The negotiator clenched their jaw. "We are losing control of the approach." The strategist nodded. "Because we never had it." A junior officer spoke up, voice shaking. "Strategist."
Hey, what?
"If they are not defending against us." The strategist turned slowly. "Explain, what if they are preparing for something else?" The officer asked. That happens when we are fully committed." The idea spread through the room like frost. The humans had not shown their hand. They had not revealed their true capability. They had only demonstrated endurance, patience, and control of their environment. The negotiator felt a weight settle on their chest. What are they waiting for? On Earth, the answer was carried in quiet conversations and steady work. In a reinforced tunnel beneath a mountain range, humans monitored deep sensors embedded in stone. The readings climbed, slow and deliberate. "Pressure is building," someone said. A woman nodded, eyes fixed on the data. "It always does before a quake." Another voice crackled through the room, fleet density increasing. "They're committing." The woman closed her eyes for a brief second. "Then we are almost there." Above, the Cathari fleet crossed an invisible threshold. Enough ships had entered Earth's influence that retreat would be slow, complicated, costly, and the corridors behind them shifted, less accommodating now. The strategists felt it like a tightening net. "This is the point of no return," they whispered. The negotiators stared at the planet, no longer beautiful, no longer fragile. "We can still strike." "Yes," the strategist said. "But striking a death world is different from conquering it. You do not break it with force. You provoke it." As if in response, Earth trembled. Not visibly. Not yet. 8. But deep within the planet, forces moved that had been moving long before humans ever existed. Plates pressed, heat climbed, energy gathered. Humans had not created these forces. They had learned to live with them. On the surface, people paused as a faint vibration passed underfoot. Glass rattled. Birds took flight. A human man in a factory steadied himself against a table and smiled grimly. "She's awake." A younger worker stared. "Is that good?" "It is what it is," the man said. "We planned for it." In orbit, Cathari sensors registered anomalies they could not classify. Gravitational ripples. Thermal blooms from beneath the crust. Magnetic spikes aligning in strange patterns. The strategists felt awe cut through fear. They're synchronizing with their planet. The negotiator's voice dropped to a whisper. "It should not be possible." "It is if your species evolved inside it," the strategist replied. The first true tremor reached the fleet seconds later. Not an attack, not a blast. A wave of force rippling outward, subtle but undeniable. Ships shuddered. Formations wavered. On the flagship, alarms flared red. Structural stress increasing. An officer called, "Shields compensating." The negotiator gripped the table. "What is happening?" The strategist answered with a quiet certainty. "They are letting Earth speak." On the Council Relay world, screens filled with warnings as gravitational sensors spiked across the region. Delegates fell silent, watching as the data painted a picture they could not ignore. This was not a battle in space. This was a confrontation with a world. It's on Earth. The woman in the tunnel watched the readings peak, then stabilize. She exhaled slowly. "Hold," she said into the mic. Not yet. The human objects in orbit remained still like sentinels. The corridors shimmered, unstable now, unpredictable. The Cathari fleet hung suspended between advance and retreat, caught in a space that felt increasingly hostile. Fear took root, deep and primal. Not fear of weapons or enemies, but fear of being somewhere you did not belong. The strategists closed their eyes briefly.
Ow.
They saw it clearly now. Humans were not defending Earth because it was their home. They were defending it because it was their teacher, and the lesson it taught was about to be shared. Above a death world that had shaped them with fire, pressure, and loss, humans waited, not with rage, not with triumph. With the calm of a species that had survived worse than an invasion. The clock continued to count down, and with every passing moment, the weight of what was coming pressed harder on every mind watching the sky, human and alien alike, as the galaxy stood on the edge of understanding what it truly meant to challenge a people born where survival was never optional. The tremor passed through the fleet like a slow heartbeat, not violent enough to tear ships apart, not gentle enough to ignore. It rolled through holes and bones, through calculations and certainty, carrying a message no translation system was needed to understand. You are standing on something alive. On the Cathari flagship, officers clutched consoles as gravity fluctuated just enough to make balance uncertain. Shields flared and dimmed. Systems reported stress that could not be traced to weapons or hostile fire. The negotiator's voice shook despite every effort to control it, stabilize, increase distance from the planet. An officer turned, fear plain on their face. We cannot. The corridors are collapsing. The magnetosphere has shifted again. The strategists closed their eyes, then opened them with a clarity that felt like grief. They have finished preparing. Outside, Earth did not rage. It did not flare or explode. It simply continued to exist, immense and indifferent, its forces moving according to laws older than any species watching it. Humans had not turned their planet into a weapon. It allowed the fleet to place itself inside a lesson. Across Earth's surface, the tremors were felt, then faded. Buildings swayed and settled. People paused, hands on walls or door frames, then resumed what they were doing. Children asked questions. Adults answered honestly. Yes, that was the ground moving. No, it does not mean we are losing. Yes, we stay ready. In a coastal town, a human woman steadied a shelf and laughed quietly, the sound thin but real. Figures, she said. The planet always gets the last word. In orbit, the second wave came. A surge of charged particles swept outward as the planet's magnetic field flexed. It was not a blast. It was a widening pressure, pushing against shields and hulls, disrupting delicate systems designed for stable environments. Several Cathari ships lost orientation. One spun slowly, engines struggling to compensate. Another drifted out of formation, its navigation flooded with noise. Panic spread through the fleet, no longer contained. Request permission to fire, a tactical officer pleaded. We must suppress whatever they are doing. The negotiator hesitated. The strategist stepped forward. Fire? At what? They asked quietly. The storms? The gravity? The planet itself? The negotiator swallowed. It issued annihilation orders before, against rebellious colonies and dangerous species. This felt different. This felt like striking the ground beneath your own feet and expecting it to obey. And a new signal arrived. Clear, stable, uninterrupted. It came from a human object drifting just beyond the interference, positioned deliberately where every major Cathari ship could receive it. The negotiator straightened. On screen, the image resolved into the same older human seen before. No raised voice, no triumphant smile, just a tired face. Eyes steady. You feel it now? The human said. That pressure, that uncertainty? The negotiator did not respond. The human continued. That is what it feels like to live here. Every day, storms, quakes, heat, cold, things that bite, things that break, things that do not care who you are. The human's gaze softened just a little. We did not build this to scare you. We built it to survive you. The strategist leaned forward, unable to stop themselves. Why not destroy us? They asked. You have the opportunity? The human shook their head. Because we know what it costs. Silence followed. The human looked past the camera for a moment, as if seeing something far away. Every time our world tried to end us, it took something. Lives, cities, years. We learned how to endure, but endurance leaves scars. They looked back. We do not want to add more if we do not have to. The negotiator's voice came out hoarse. Then what do you want? The human did not answer immediately. When they did, it was simple. We want you to leave. The negotiator bristled. Cannot expect us to retreat without consequence. The human nodded. Do. And we expect you to remember. The feed ended. On the council relay world, the chamber erupted. Some delegates shouted for immediate withdrawal. Others demanded retaliation before the fleet was humiliated further. Trade worlds feared instability. Military powers feared precedent. The older delegates stood, their voice cutting through the chaos. "If you stay," they said, "you risk learning something you cannot unlearn." The council hesitated. They looked at the data streaming in, at ships struggling against a planet that refused to be passive, at civilians across Earth who did not flee, but watched and waited, at a species that had not begged. On the flagship, the negotiator finally spoke the words that would define their career. "Signal a full withdrawal." The room froze. A tactical officer stared at his surrender. "No," the strategist said softly. "That is survival." Orders rippled through the fleet. Engines flared as ships struggled to pull free of Earth's influence. The corridors reopened, not kindly, but enough. The planet did not chase them. It did not need to. One by one, the ships retreated, battered and shaken, carrying with them contamination they would never fully scrub away. Dust in filters, microbes in vents, data scars in systems. Proof they had been there. As the fleet withdrew, a final tremor passed through the region, gentler than the rest, almost like a release. On Earth, people watched the sky clear. The strange lights faded. Hum in the air softened. Someone cheered, then stopped, uncertain. Another person cried quietly. Most just sat down where they were and breathed. A human man leaned against his truck, staring up. "Guess they decided we were not worth the trouble." An older woman nearby shook her head. "No," she said, "they decided we were." In the days that followed, the galaxy changed. Reports spread faster than any official announcement. Crews told stories. Civilians whispered warnings. Scientists argued over data that suggested planets could be used as shields if a species understood them deeply enough. But beneath the analysis, a simpler truth took root.
Ow!
Humans were not strong because they were cruel. They were strong because they had been shaped by a world that demanded resilience and offered no mercy. On the Council Relay world, a motion passed quietly, without ceremony. Earth would be classified as a protected system. No further incursions permitted without unanimous consent. The file label was updated. "Deathworld, do not provoke." Some protested. Others felt relief. The strategist returned home months later, changed. They stood under an artificial sky that never stormed and felt unsettled by its calm. They found themselves listening for sounds that never came. They wrote a report that would be studied for generations. "Do not mistake laughter for weakness. Do not mistake endurance for aggression. And never give a Deathworld species time unless you are prepared for what they do with it." On Earth, life resumed. Storms still came. Quakes still happened. People still argued and struggled and rebuilt. Invasion did not make the world gentle. It did not erase hardship. But it reminded humanity of something they already knew. They had survived worse than fleets. In a small home, the child who had drawn the box-shaped ship added another picture to their paper. This time, it was the planet, big and rough, with small figures standing on it, holding hands. Above it, they wrote a new word, "endure." The mother watched and smiled, tired but proud. Years later, when humans walked openly among the stars, alien children would stare at them with wide eyes, some with fear. They would ask why humans were so calm in chaos, why they joked when things went wrong, why they seemed so comfortable on unstable worlds. Humans would shrug and answer simply. "This is easy," they would say. "We grew up on hard, and somewhere deep beneath Earth's crust, the planet would continue to move and shift, indifferent to praise or blame, having done what it had always done. It had made survivors, not perfect ones, not gentle ones, but ones who knew how to stand their ground, laugh at the sky, and endure whatever the universe thought to throw at them next."